The word psychology means the science of the mind. According to the ancients, the mind is not separate from the other functional organisms of man. So the psychology of the ancient Indians deals with the various functions of man, and it is understood as a synthesis of many functions. The subject is a bit technical, but I will try to explain matters as simply as possible. But in one lecture, I can give you only the skeleton of the subject. That is a rough map of the whole subject. It will be like the globe in an atlas. You can see the globe at a glance in the atlas, but to understand the whole globe, you have to travel the whole earth. But however, I will give you the atlas as clearly as possible. I will try to eliminate the technical terms also and give you only the narration of the science. According to the ancient Indians, matter is of 5 states: the solid, liquid, the phenomena of heat and light called fire technically, the gaseous state called air, and the space. They considered space also as a state of matter. That may appear strange, but that requires some introduction which is not relevant here. Now we come to the psychology of the human being according to the ancient Indian scientists. We know that man has a brain. Brain is different from mind. That also we know. Brain is the physical seat of mind. The modern anatomy and the modern physiology give us different parts of the brain and give us the information about their functions separately. The ancient psychologists understood that the whole vertebral column is a ladder of many brains. There are many brains or brain centers along the vertebral column. Suppose we imagine the vertebral column like this. Excuse me, the figure is very bad. It is not like vertebral column. I am very bad at drawing figures. Therefore, try to cooperate with me and imagine that this is the rough figure of the vertebral column. Imagine that this is our head and this is the end or the tip of the vertebral column. This is otherwise called the coccyx. Here is the brain which we know. Here is another brain. Like that, there are brain centers. 1, 2, like this, 7 brain centers. That means centers which function in us and centers which carry an intelligence that functions in us. There is physical matter in our body. All this matter is composed of what you can see in the chemistry laboratory. Many chemical compounds. For example, calcium compounds, phosphorus compounds, potassium compounds, iron compounds. All these chemical compounds are there in our body. If you put these compounds in a test tube, they will stand without any change. Or if there are some compounds which react to one another, there will be some activity. Sometimes there may be an explosion. Sometimes some gas may be emitted. Sometimes there will be a precipitate. Sometimes there will be some smells giving out. There is activity, but that activity is not continuous. The moment you mix two chemicals, there is activity and again it stops. Again you should put the chemicals to have the activity. For the chemical activity, it requires a person to mix these compounds. Unless there is a person like that in us, our body cannot have the same chemical combination for years and years. For us to live in this body, for the body to absorb food and for it to grow, for taking in of the chemicals, and giving out the chemicals that are already exhausted, there should be a person here. We know definitely that we are not doing it. We are eating food, we know only that much. There is another person, that means another intelligence, who is taking in the material from the food and distributing into the required chemicals in required proportion. This is simple common sense. Yet it is a high scientific truth which we fail to understand. Not because it is very, very difficult to understand this, but because we ignore things which are taking place naturally. Then we drink water, and that intelligence which is there as a specialist of water in us, he takes the water and distributes properly into the body. For example, some part of it into the blood, some part of it into the other juices of the digestive system. So also into the kidneys, into the respiratory, into the perspiration pores. And water is required for many things. For example, we want salivation. Without water in the mouth, we cannot eat anything. We cannot know the taste. Whenever tears are required, there should be water in us. Without tears, the eyes will go away into deterioration. Like that, there is an intelligence to distribute the solid matter in us and give out the solid matter that is already exhausted. Another intelligence who distributes the water in us and give out the water that is not necessary. Similarly, heat is required in us. We know we have temperature. That is the sign of a living being. Daily, many thousands of calories of heat is produced in our body. That should be converted into energy and should be used for different functions. And there should be a regulator of the heat of the body. You know there are heaters in your rooms. You also know that there is air conditioned apparatus. With the help of these machines, you are regulating the temperature of the room. When it is very, very chill, you will make the heater heated more. In our countries, hot countries, when it is hot, we will use the air conditioners. So there should be an operator upon our heat, one who regulates the heat in us. When the atmosphere is very chill, you will find that your body is more warm. When the summer is very hot, you will find perspiration on the body and the temperature is lessened. So there is an expert who regulates the heat of our body. Then there is also another intelligence who takes in oxygen, uses it for the required purposes through our lungs, take the dangerous material from the body and convert it into the carbon compounds of our body and give out as carbon dioxide. When by accident we inhale some poisonous gases, this expert of air produces the gases which are required to counteract the poisonous gas and tries to keep us living. So another expert. How many experts? One is for solid. He should have a center or an office to work. He should have a laboratory room to work. And here it is. At the tip of the vertebral column, the expert who works with the solid materials in our body has his laboratory room. Through that room, he has his telephone connections, mainly 3 connections. One may be to India, one may be to South America, another may be to North America. There are 3 main nerves connecting there. These nerves serve as telephone connections for him to receive messages, send messages, and also make his subordinates work. There are subordinate scientists who are working with him. They are his students, faithful students. They know how to control the muscles and relax the muscles. By controlling the muscles and relaxing the muscles, he controls all the solid matter of our body and also gives out the unnecessary matter through the rectum. Here in the second plane, there is the expert who works with heat. He has a machine which produces the required calories of heat, a very good electric heater. He has more telephone connections than the first one because heat is more required to move the material and conduct the chemical actions of the physical matter. He controls also the centers of heat. There are other centers where heat is required. This expert has his laboratory room in an organ which we call the spleen. Next, there is the expert who works with the water. He has his regulators, he has his reservoirs and taps, two types of taps. One type to get fresh water in, another type to send away the dirty water outside. He has more telephone connections than the second fellow because water has more functions to do in us than heat. So here is one Mr. Brain, another Mr. Brain, a third Mr. Brain for solid, for heat, for liquid. This fellow has his laboratory room in the center of nerves, nervous center, which is near the navel. It is called the solar plexus. The first laboratory is called the base center. The center is within the vertebral column. It is not outside. The second center is called the spleen center. This center is also in the vertebral column and controls the heat through the spleen. The center is not in the spleen because more important of is upstairs. So within the spinal column. The third is called the solar plexus. That brain center is also in the vertebral column. Next, there is the expert of gases, air. That center is also located in the spinal column near the region where the heart is because that has to control the lungs and the heart. All these centers have telephone connections with each other because the first fellow, first scientist, is an expert in producing this activity in the muscles, the centripetal and the centrifugal activity, called by the doctors peristalsis. So, he has to look after the peristalsis of the heart also like this, and the lungs also like. From here, this is controlled, this activity of the muscles is controlled. From the second fellow, heat is supplied to the heart and the lungs. From the third fellow, water is supplied into the blood. Then he manages to see that the lungs take in air and give out carbon dioxide. He also looks after the air supply of the lower centers. This is called the heart center. Because the heart is controlled like this, every time when the heart expands, blood comes in, and every time when it contracts, blood goes out. In the meanwhile, very quickly, when the blood comes in, before it goes out, this scientist attracts the blood to the lungs, purifies it with the oxygen, and again sends it. This we know from any ordinary textbook of physiology. But the modern science physiology is not yet developed enough to understand that there is a brain center to do all this. It is because the modern psychology, including the parapsychology, cannot understand that there are brains except here. The psychology knows that there is only one brain to man. Parapsychology also knows that the brain has some higher functions, but they are still primitive enough not to understand that there are many brains in man. Gradually, they will come to the stage of understanding. But in the meanwhile, they can very easily take information from the ancient books without feeling the vanity. That is, suppose there are some people who do not want to believe that the ancient man was also knowing sciences. Similarly, there are people who do not want to believe that modern people are very good at understanding. Some people condemn the ancient wisdom thinking that the ancient man was only a savage. Some people condemn the modern man, thinking that the modern man is only a materialist. Both these people are ignorant. We can compare these two fellows, one as a man having his right eye blind, another having his left eye blind. Anyhow, one eye lost. It is healthy to have both the eyes. A true scientist never condemns any piece of information. A true scientist is not orthodox to reject the ancient things. Just as there are orthodox people who reject the modern things, there are also orthodox people who reject the ancient things. By doing so, they become blind of one eye. The modern psychology can have very good supplementary knowledge of the other brains of man that are there in the spinal column. Now we are with the air expert. Above the air expert, there is another expert who is well versed in space science. He knows the space activity, the properties of space. If we do not know the properties of space, we think that space is empty. We think that the space is a vacuum. Even though we study the sciences for many years, even though we may be called an international scientist by all these scientific academies of all countries, we think that there is vacuum. You know that all the modern scientists, except a few, are thinking that the space is a vacuum, that they can exhaust air from space and have vacuum. They think like that because there is a vacuum in their mind. Excuse me, it is a truth. Even though it is not very sweet to receive, it is a truth and nobody can deny it. Space is not empty because we know the activity of the radioactive waves. They travel in space. If space were to be an empty vacuum, we can't expect the radioactive waves to travel in space. We need not think of the radioactive. Just observe what happens in your conversation. You are thinking an idea, making it a sentence in your mind, and speaking it out through your vocal cord. The vocal cords are producing only sound, they are not producing ideas, and this sound is escaping into space as sound waves. The ear of another person is receiving these waves without a wire, without a connection, without an apparent vehicle, and translating the sound waves again into letters, into words, into a sentence, and again into an idea. The same idea as was produced by the other person. If we properly think about our conversation and its activity, we come to the safe conclusion that there is something in space which is carrying the sound vibrations from place to place. To understand this, it does not require a very high rate of genius. It requires only simple common sense and nothing more. Your genius is required to understand greater things, but for such silly things, common sense is enough. Now we will proceed. I think we are with the space scientist. In us, there is a laboratory for the space scientist. It is exactly opposite to our throat pit in the vertebral column, within the vertebral column. This is because he has much to do with our throat. He has to make our vocal cords vibrate, produce sound vibration, so that they may be absorbed into space and others may receive them. Also, he has to receive sound vibrations, get them here, and do the translation work. He has this double purpose. So he has constructed his laboratory building in a street which is very near to his operation center, that is the throat center. This is another brain, and there is another brain. So once again we sum up: solid matter, heat, liquid, gas, air. The gas is air, then and space. Here these complete the 5 states of matter according to the ancient scientists. Where from this matter is come is a question. Where from this question comes? Here is the laboratory where from this question comes. The 6th laboratory, 6th brain. This laboratory is the laboratory of mind, what we know as mind. There are 5 minds and 5 brains without our knowledge, and the 6th mind is what we call mind. These people are working for themselves, these 5 experts, because the 6th mind is very dull. If they wait for his orders, man will die. No scientist will wait for a dunce, for a dull man,
So,
for
yeah.
one who is not intelligent. He is intelligent only for some things. That is, to select good articles from the bazaar, to purchase them at a cheaper rate, to do good business in the market, and to pick up more francs from his business. So all these routine things which do not require higher intelligence. These routine things are called samsara in Sanskrit. Samsara means automatically going on without our originality. So this mind is not original. That is why it is used for reading and understanding sciences. What we call knowledge, what we call education, what we call degrees is only a collection of bundles of dead thoughts. And this fellow will be carrying these bundles on his head. It contains our beliefs, our knowledge, which is nothing but information. We call information by the name knowledge. We gather other people's thoughts through textbooks. We gather great people's thoughts and we speak out those thoughts, just as I am doing it now. That we call knowledge. So this fellow is enough for it. To get ourselves graduate